One of the things not talked about near enough in the natural and drug-free healing world is something called healing plateaus and regressions. These are very common, often natural and normal, and truth be told, extremely frustrating, disheartening, and discouraging aspects of the healing journey for many patients and parents. And oftentimes you'll be making incredible strides in progress, and then seemingly out of nowhere, things slow down, stall out, or stop altogether. And maybe you've even noticed some regression. Behaviors, sensory issues returning that you thought were gone forever, sleep disruptions creeping back in, or emotional regulation challenges resurfacing. And if you're wondering if the care plan is failing or if something's wrong, I want you to take a deep breath and hear this. Plateaus and even regressions are often a normal and necessary part of the healing process. The neurological healing journey is rarely a straight line. In fact, it's more like a roller coaster with its fair share of ups, downs, and unexpected twists. And here's the thing most parents and providers can miss. Those plateaus aren't always signs of failure. They're actually evidence that your child's nervous system is working through deeper layers of dysfunction and adapting to a new level of organization. This message is for parents whose children are on a drug-free neurological healing journey. And that's whether your child struggles with sensory, ADHD, autism, developmental delays, whatever it is, and you've noticed periods where progress seems to stall or even reverse. Today, I'll explain why these plateaus happen and why growth spurts, immune challenges, environmental factors, emotional stressors, and other things can lead to those plateaus, which we will identify, break down the science behind, and get you the confidence to navigate through and break through these plateaus to the healing journey on the other side. As a neurologically focused pediatric chiropractor, I see this pattern daily in our practice. Nearly every parent who brings their child in for care will experience what research often calls to this non-linear healing progress. And this research on neuroplasticity shows us that the brain has the ability to reorganize itself, forming new connections, and in some instances, even generating new neurons and synapses. And it's been observed that children typically experience periods of rapid advancement followed by these consolidation phases where these skills are integrated. And the same pattern applies to neurological healing. It's kind of like 2 steps forward, 1 step to the side or back, meaning that progression is not always linear, and it isn't a failure or something not working if you hit a plateau, but it's actually the brain's natural way of reorganizing and creating lasting change. In this video, we'll break down the different things that can lead to these plateaus, kind of lead to this stalling out period, and we'll break down the science as to what's actually going on and how, in the vast majority of cases, it's actually a good thing. There's 2 to 3 cases where it's not necessarily good, and we want to move that thing out of the way in order to get breakthrough. But as you'll learn by the end of this video, so much of this is natural, it's normal, and it's actually neurologically needed. I know that's a lot of nerdy neurological conversation right out of the gates. Let's get even nerdier. Okay, after almost 2 decades of clinical practice, working not just in the beginning of care with families as they look to get their child to heal fully, completely, incredibly, but all the way through it, months and years of working knee to knee, head to head, heart to heart with so many cases, I can tell you this roller coaster is pretty normal, especially with tougher neurological delays and the different things that we specialize in. This is how healing happens. The other thing that is totally normal and totally regular is life. We're about to go through this list of different things that can lead to a plateau or lead to sometimes, if enough of these stressors, or if they're severe enough, or if they come in combination, which will make sense in just a few minutes, they can actually overwhelm the nervous system enough to not only lead to a plateau, but actually lead to a bit of a regression. Now, again, as we make our way through this list and we talk about growth spurts and we talk about fever or illnesses or weather changes and seasonal changes, and yes, even what may seem like wild and crazy stuff like full moons and mold in the house, a lot of this is not avoidable. But some of it is. So this list is really meant to empower parents to be proactive, to be able to see what's happening at all times as care progresses and maybe as care plateaus, and be able to say, okay, this list over here, there's nothing we can do about it, but we know this is why we're stuck for a little bit. This isn't going to last. Developmental, growth spurts, teething, fevers, they don't last forever. So your child's actually going to come out stronger on the other side. We'll break that down next. And then this list over here where maybe there's too many toxins or too many good things, like too many therapies, too many interventions, all stacked up and piled up at one time, and they're overwhelming your child's already overwhelmed system. Well, that list we can actually be a little bit more engaged with and take action on. And so by the end of this video, you will see the list of things that aren't really necessarily in our control, but it'll help calm your nervous system to go, oh, that's what this is. That's why we're at this plateau. And then the other list is to say, okay, these are some things we have some control with. Let's work on them. If we have our kiddo stuck at a plateau or worse, regressing, let's work on a few of these things so we can get forward progress and breakthrough once again. So let's start with the one that is by far the most common. Every child, this is a pediatric conversation, every kid goes through growth spurts and developmental milestones. And what happens when the body is going through a growth spurt is it has to allocate its resources to keep up with that growth or that developmental, what we like to call surge. That's what milestones are. So what we know about neurodevelopment, like we talked about already in the intro in this video, it's not linear and it's not just step by step by step. It's not like a textbook where it's like, okay, we're going to do chapter 1 and then chapter 2. What happens is growth and development with the nervous system as God designed it, it's kind of like interval training. All right. You ever heard of a thing called Tabata? So bad joke, but I still at a ripe young age of 43 like to pretend to be a CrossFitter. And my favorite workouts are ones where you get after it. So Tabata, interval training, CrossFit, you fill in the blank, HIIT training, right? High intensity interval training. What does that mean? It means you push your nervous system, you push your body at a pretty significant clip, and then you get some time off. And boy, is the time off wonderful. Well, that's growth and development with physical growth spurts, neurological growth spurts, even social emotional growth spurts. You've seen that with your kiddo, right? Where seemingly overnight, they're 2 inches taller. Seemingly overnight, they've put on 6 pounds. And seemingly overnight, they're talking in sentences, right? So this is how development happens. Well, because it's a surge, because it's a spurt, hence the name growth spurts we're all aware of, that is a high use, high allocation and usage of the nervous system and the body's resources. Well, let's say your kiddo is still healing at the same time as they are growing and developing, which is all pediatric cases. Well, now the energy, and I'm not talking woo-woo weirdo energy, I'm talking actual like neurophysiological ATP, mitochondrial healing energy within the nervous system and the physiological system. So don't take the word energy and lose track here. There's actually physiology behind what I'm talking about. The resources to heal and the resources to keep up with growth and development come from the same shop. They come from the same factory. So when a kid hits a growth spurt, we see all the time in practice that they're healing from autism, from epilepsy, from whatever it may be, may just slow down, stall out, and reach a little bit of a plateau. So we'll get to the end what we can do to break through these plateaus. But first off, know that growth spurts and developmental milestones will, and it's the same thing, right? We know what's happening. They're eating more, they're sleeping more, they're a little more moody, right? They're just a little off track. That's a growth spurt. That's going to get healing off track too. They're still making progress. It just changes its pace for a season. Now, another significant factor. This is, and the way I rank to these, it's kind of hard to say, oh, this one's more common. All kids tend to go through all of these things, especially these first couple on the list. We can't really avoid them. And so this is just what we see in practice. This whole list is what we see all the time. And I do have them ranked a little bit as to the most common ones, but the differences aren't that much. So the second one is immune challenges, fever, cold, flu, those sort of challenges with the immune system. The nervous system, which controls social, emotional, cognitive development. So let's say we're working on a kiddo with sensory challenges, behavior challenges, anxiety, autism, these neuro-focused challenges. When that kiddo gets sick and their immune system is working overtime to try and get through a cold or get through a flu or get through an illness, it's going to throw the nervous system and the brain off track. So there's going to be probably a little bit of a plateau, if not even a regression of some of the sensory issues, the behavior issues. Even in the epilepsy world, we know for sure when a kiddo has a fever, they are more at risk for an uptick in seizures. There is a lot of neurophysiological science behind this. We could get into the hypothalamus and the nervous system and the sympathetics and the parasympathetic and the vagus nerve, not for the point of this video. If you want to learn more about these healing plateaus, just click the link in our bio or the link that comes with this video. We have written really in-depth articles on our website about all the neuroscience behind this, and I'm diving deep, but there's more if you want to learn it and read the research behind it. But fever, immune challenges really distract the body. So think of it again about energy resource allocation. actual energy resource allocation. Now the neuroimmune system, because the nervous system controls the immune system. So the nervous system controls and coordinates healing, and it controls the gut, the immune system, the endocrine system. So if it has to send a bunch of resources over to the immune system to fight off the virus or the bacteria or the pathogen, it's going to get distracted and the healing progress might plateau. So totally normal, pretty darn natural that when a kiddo is going through a fever or an illness, they might reach a healing plateau with the thing that you're working on, okay? Now, the next thing on the list here is just the busyness of life. So this is kind of our segue thing. We've got 5 total things we're going to make our way through. We're on number 3, and number 3 is kind of a general construct that sets up number 4, meaning this: when life gets really busy. So we will see kids, not just teenagers and not just adult patients, but when life gets emotional, when there's a loss of a loved one, when there's a lot of relationship stress in the family, when the schedule is just maxed out and there's tons of noise and tons of chaos and tons going on with the family, kind of that busy life cycle all of us families hit, or that emotional, stressful moments in life all of us families hit. We try and avoid these, but they come around, right? Well, that's a time where everybody in the family, the nervous system is going to respond to that stress, that chaos, that busyness with a sympathetic surge, a fight or flight surge, where the fight or flight sympathetic stress side of the nervous system, which is always in the way of healing, development, and progress. So that's what we teach through this is subluxation, sympathetic dominance. Those are the things that cause our kids to struggle in the first place. So the healing program, the care plan, is really getting rid of stress on the nervous system, getting rid of stress on the body. Well, if there's a stressful period of time in the family and in life, that's where that's going to come to be. So an easy example of this is actually with adults, right? They're going through care and then work gets crazy. Well, that can plateau. Teenagers, they're healing maybe from anxiety and different challenges that we're working on with them, drug-free, naturally, and then final exams or stress with friends, whatever it may be, shows up. Okay, well, that could cause a plateau because healing is about getting rid of stuck stress on the body and nervous system and becoming more resilient and more adaptable to stress. So when stress levels are high, that can add up to a plateau. But this is also a great point in this one then to kind of reteach the core lesson. Not all stress is bad. Growth spurts are needed. It's actually how the body gets obviously bigger, stronger, and more resilient. Teething is essential to train the nervous system how to handle stress. Fever is essential. We've done whole podcasts, whole videos, whole everything about that again and again. Fever is essential to getting the immune system stronger and more resilient. This is the principle of chiropractic. We don't get our kids healthy and stronger by avoiding stress. We get our kids to develop optimally, heal fully, and be at their best for life by building resilience and building adaptability. So in a perfect world, every single one of us parents on the surface, if we really kind of take a medical approach to it, we would put our kids in a bubble and say, I hope they never get sick. I hope they never go through a significant stressor. I hope nothing bad ever happens. And that's what every one of our parent hearts wants. But the context right in the middle of this list is really where we can teach the big lesson from this one that says it's about helping our kiddos build resilience, adaptability through different life stressors that over time not only break us through these healing plateaus and regressions like we're talking about in this one, but build up resilience. So I want you to know that when your kiddo has a growth spurt, a developmental surge, a fever, an illness, they're detoxing, they're working their way through a cold or a virus, or maybe they're healing from toxic exposures, adverse reactions, mold, and it's a bumpy road, and they're going through a plateau or they're going through a regression. When you really take what we're teaching in this one and you see it for what it is, and you stay the course, and you add more healing to the system, and again, I'll say it one more time, stay the course, you're actually going to get a kiddo whose nervous system, whose health and well-being and quality of life is markedly, significantly better as a result of going through the plateau and coming out stronger and more resilient on the other side. Okay, finishing the list, number 4 and 5, these are things we absolutely can control. And these are things, again, depending upon the case, the time, the plateau. And again, this is, it's tough sometimes making these sort of messages because we're talking about this in a bigger construct versus one-on-one. In our office and all PX Docs offices, we really personalize and individualize every single care and every single clinical decision at each point or stage or phase of the care, including plateaus. And we break down into that kid's case. Hey, here's what's causing this one. So we're a little high level with this one, but these are 2 other things we see in clinical practice all of the time that lead to a healing plateau. Number 1, too many toxins. So this is a case where you may be doing neurologically focused chiropractic, PT, OT, speech therapy, different things to work on their nervous system, but their immune system is still, and their gut are still just exposed to too many toxins. So this is a place where we need to clean up the diet. We need to get gluten and grains and those sort of things maybe out of the world. We need out of the way. We need out of the world. We need to get dairy and those things out. We definitely need to get preservatives and pesticides and chemicals out of our food, and really often look into the home environment as well. And once you open up this box, you'll see, oh my gosh, chemicals are everywhere. They're in our cleaners, they're in our clothes, they're in our detergents for the laundry machine and the dishwasher, they're in the cookware and the things that we make food with, let alone being chock full in the food, preservatives. If you can't pronounce it, don't put it into your kids' food. If you can't pronounce it, don't have it be in their cleaners. And so one of the biggest things we see when kids will plateau or get stuck is, hey, they got everything they need on the inside for their neurophysiological system, but maybe it's just a game of tug of war where there's such continued exposure to toxins and different kind of pollutants and mold and chemicals and these things. And so in these cases, we will often, every time actually, we will really empower, educate, and equip our families with ways to clean up the diet, clean up the environment, and get the toxins out of the home, out of everything, and out of the way. And you know what the last thing on the list is? And it's the one, again, I think this conversation around plateaus and regressions needs to be had way more often by way more providers to really help parents, because healing is not linear. Healing is a flipping roller coaster, and it's up and it's down and it gets stuck and it goes sideways. By the way, isn't the worst place? You ever been on a roller coaster? I have just 1 or 2 times in my life where you're like out there and then they stop it. And then you're like, oh, we got a little maintenance issue. And you're like, I've never been on one where you're like hanging upside down and they have a maintenance issue, but, or at the very, very top of the thing. That'd be the worst place ever. But I've been on them enough times where it's like, not too comfortable sitting in this thing. Well, that's the exact feeling of a healing plateau. You're like, oh, we were getting there, we were going through, and now we're stuck. You know, one of the things, and it's kind of a combination of things, some that people just don't talk about enough, is when there's too many treatments coming into too many interventions, and they might even be good. They might be natural. It might be this deep dive biomedical. It might be this deep dive of homeopathic and supplements and vitamins and IVIG and detoxes and binders. In today's clinical practice, by far, the number one thing that we still see cause healing plateaus is growth spurts and teething and fever and illnesses and seasonal changes and weather changes. I think I forgot to sneak that one in there, but that happens because the nervous system has to adapt to those too. Okay, so those are the most common things that we cannot avoid. They happen, and that's what's going on. And they're going to throw healing off track for a minute. This we can avoid. This one, we can really look at the system in a bigger picture, and we can say, hey, are all of these things awesome on paper, but are all of these things maybe too much all at once for our child? And so a lot of times it's getting to sit knee to knee with parents and have this medication conversation. And again, not in my scope of practice. So we simply say, hey, your child is healing. They're getting better. And again, getting a little deeper into this work, we've got signs with our scans and our insight scans. We're actually tracking progress, not just from a symptomatic standpoint to see if we're continuing to make progress or if we're running into a plateau regression, but we're actually tracking the progress through our insight scans. And we can see when we reach a plateau or a stuck point. And often that plateau is due to now medication in the way. Now that's a point of time where we don't have the conversation and say up, down, what, left, right with that. We simply say, hey, here's the neurophysiological reality behind this. Go sit down with your medical provider, go sit down with the doctor who prescribed this medication, and just have this conversation and have them take a fresh look at your child's function right now. Is this still needed? Is it the same level? Is it the right dosage? Again, not in the scope of our practice as a chiropractor, but understanding the entire clinical picture of healing is. And we run into these plateaus all the time because now a child's neurophysiological function is getting better. So the reason that they were on the medication may not even exist from neurophysiological dysfunction in the first place. So if you took, let's say, an ADHD medication, if you took an ADHD stimulant class 2 narcotic, because that's what they are, they're on the same as Coke. So if you took those and you put them into a child or a person's nervous system that doesn't have the condition, guess what they have? Signs and symptoms of the condition. So if you're getting the root cause adjusted, and rebalanced, and the medication stays at the same dosage and the same thing, it's going to cause problems. And that's something that can lead to a plateau or even a regression. So that's one of them on this final thing on the list. And the last one is the one that people probably wouldn't really think of too much, but often it's too many good things. You've heard the phrase too much of a good thing. Well, often a child just needs a breather. There might be too many appointments, PT, OT, speech, ABA, biomedical interventions, detoxes, binders, supplements, fermented fat, you name it. A lot of times, the most common clinical presentation we see nowadays is the coolest one ever. Parents are doing 50 things all at once to try and get their kiddo to heal and get better. That's the best place from a commitment and a mental, emotional, all in, we're going to get our kid to heal standpoint and perspective as a parent. But breaking down this neurophysiology of actual root cause, full, complete, plateau busting through healing, often what the nervous system needs to heal is just more room, more space. Because what happens is a lot of therapies and a lot of supplements and a lot of vitamins and a lot of detoxes and a lot of homeopathics and a lot of essential oils and a lot of things, all good, happening all at once to an already overwhelmed, dysregulated, off-track nervous system and physiological system can cause it to actually stay off track, stay overwhelmed, and stay stuck spinning its tires. So a lot of times, this is a farmer analogy I'll close with, but once we can make some changes into this world, if it's the right thing for the medical world, again, that's where parents and patients got to go talk to their medical doctors, not in our scope of practice, never even pretend to be, but let's say it's the right thing to be able to make some moves on the medication and back off there. Maybe it's the right thing to make some moves on the therapies and back off there. And maybe it's the right thing to make some moves on some functional integrative supplements, detoxes, these sort of things, and back off there to clear space and momentum for the nervous system to heal. The farmer analogy of that is what we call picking up the plow. What happens is if you're trying to drive your car forward and the parking brake or the plow, so a plow is like this blade that's still stuck in the ground, so it's obviously going to drag things and slow things down. Well, if you pick up that plow, if you release that parking brake, guess what? You can pop, I'll give you one more analogy, mechanical, right? If you've ever driven a manual transmission car, you can pop that clutch and say, bam, here we go. Now that engine takes off because there's not that drag, there's not that plow, there's not that parking brake holding things back. So the first part of our message today, the things on that list, the weather changes, the growth spurts, the teething, and sometimes, again, they just got to fight through a fever and an illness. It's actually good. It's stronger on the other side. That's not always entirely avoidable. This stuff, some of the toxin exposure, some of the stress in our life, and some of the different interventions that maybe can go on the shelf and just hit pause and give a little room for healing. That other half of the list is in our control. And so when your child is stuck at a plateau, this message, this one here was meant to give you as much as we could in a decent amount of time, give you the whole picture as to what could be causing these plateaus. I'll tell you this. The majority of healing plateaus and regressions we run into with our patients, it's not a singular thing on this list. It's usually a growth spurt with teething while we're in the middle of spring, there's a full moon, and life is crazy busy because it's, what else happens at spring? It's the end of school year. There's a million sports going on. The family's crazy. Usually, there's like a mini perfect storm happening within this where there's 2, 3, 4, 5 things that pile up all at once that actually cause the plateau. So what I wanted to do is to do a pretty in-depth conversation with this one today and get you the full list so you can say, oh, actually it's this and that. Or sometimes it is just one thing. And those are better cases because we can identify it, handle it, and get to the other side of the plateau and get through this breakthrough. So again, if you want more resources, we've got a really well-written, well-formatted article all about these healing plateaus and all about the things that will often cause us to get stuck in these places, because we know that these healing plateaus can be so frustrating to parents. But please do not get discouraged. Most of the time, it's simply one or more of these outside stressors just putting a little bit of headwind at play. And once that stressor passes and your child builds up that resilience, bam, you're off to the races with a breakthrough and a healing progress and leap forward on the other side. And remember, back to the very beginning of this, often it's not even the outside stressors. Often it's just normal neuroplasticity, neurological healing, and neurological reorganization. I mentioned a few times about the article and the other resources we have around the neuroscience behind healing plateaus and the action steps you can take to break through and get to the other side. To get access to those additional resources, simply click the link in our bio with this video or comment below or send us a DM and we'll get you those resources.